Hey guys, Mark Meckler here, and I'm your host for the BattleCry, and I'm going to try something to start that is probably not recommended that you do at home, and that is I'm going to try and pick up Doc and put him in my lap, and he's my new Great Dane. I say new. He's now 5.5 months old. He's over 90 pounds. I haven't weighed him in a while because he's so heavy, so we're going to see if we can get him up in the lap, if he's going to cooperate. I don't even know. 90 pounds of dog is a lot, 90 plus pounds, so Doc, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. Ready? Come on up. Oh, there we go. There's the little guy. That is 90 pounds, 90 plus pounds of Great Dane. I don't know how much longer we'll be able to do this. I just wanted you guys to get a quick look. He's here. He's going to go back. He's going to lay down. Okay, what a way to open the BattleCry. Work up a little sweat, hauling Doc up on the lap. You can see him sitting back there. His buddy Winston's too big to be in the lap anymore. But that's what we got going on at home. Lots of other great stuff. Lots of stuff in the news. What I want to start with, though, is I want to start with the battle cry, the call to action, which is what we always do. And actually, this is one that I've done a bunch of times before, so I apologize for doing it again. But I think this is really important because there's so much that goes on in the news every week, and there's a lot of noise out there. So here we're going to use a show and tell. I want you to put on your hearing protection. For those of you who are firearms folks, you might recognize this, our Ear Pro. These are Walker razors. I like them. They're electronic hearing protection. Why do I want you to put on your hearing protection? Because I want you to ignore the noise. There's a lot of noise out there. It's really loud right now. And so this is particularly important. The news is going crazy. There's all these stories. People are screaming and yelling, all this stuff going on. And this is particularly true of the first thing I want to cover tonight, which is the tariff wars. There's so much noise around the tariff wars, and there's noise from the left. All these folks on the left say how bad it is to have tariffs, how horrible it is to have tariffs. It's important that you remember that Bernie Sanders called for tariffs, Obama called for tariffs, Hillary called for tariffs. This has been a thing on the left for a long time, and their purpose is to protect industries, right? Again, I'm not even taking a position here. I'm just reviewing the historical record. So we have had people on the left calling for tariffs to protect United States industries forever. And now they're screaming that Trump actually doing the thing and imposing the tariffs is really bad. Now we have people on the right also who are saying the tariffs are horrible. You know, for example, one of my personal favorites, Ben Shapiro, this week he spent one of his shows almost in its entirety just ripping apart the tariffs and criticizing President Trump over the tariffs and expressing his fears about what this would do to the economy. So I want to kind of cover tariffs in a general sense and talk about realistically what they are, how they work, what did President Trump do, how is this going to affect our economy? By the way, my answer is I'm not sure. In the long term, in the short term, I think we can see already some negative effects on the economy. But I don't think Trump is looking at this in the short term. I think he's looking at it in the longer term. I think he's trying to realign world trade. And so let's just kind of run through tariffs generally. So a tariff, first of all, this is important that you understand what it is. It's a tax on goods coming from a foreign nation into the United States. And that tax is collected as the goods come into the United States, and it goes into the coffers of the United States. So I think one of the things that Trump is trying to do, and I've talked to a lot of people in DC and people inside the administration, is he's trying to raise a bunch of money through tariffs. And it's estimated that he says he'll collect, and his economic advisors say he's going to collect about $600 billion a year. That's a lot of money. And that goes towards reducing the deficit if it puts more money in the tax coffers. Now, where's that money actually come from? And this is a critical criticism of tariffs, right? It's not going to come out of the firms, primarily of the firms who are importing into the United States, exporting from their country, who were importing their goods. It's going to come from the consumers. This is just reality. This is what companies do. The prices of foreign goods are going to go up in the United States. And if you're like me or anybody else, even if you try to buy US made goods, you buy a lot of foreign made goods. I know I try to source US made goods. They're already a lot more expensive. Now foreign goods are going to be more expensive. And so you're going to end up paying more for those foreign goods. So the taxes, in essence, are going to be paid by the American taxpayer. When the price of things go up, it risks increasing inflation as well. And so this is going to be interesting to see what the price indexes look like and what happens. And then there is the possibility that this slows down the economy. In other words, if everything costs you more, you're going to buy less. And that might slow down production inside the United States, slow down the economy, slow down job creation, all of that stuff. So it could potentially have a negative effect on the United States. Now, there's a flip side too. There's positive effects potentially on the United States. We've already seen this from Trump, which is a lot of companies are saying we're going to move our manufacturing jobs from overseas to in the United States. Chevrolet just announced they're going to produce a lot more cars inside the United States to avoid the tariffs, so they don't have to raise the prices on their cars. It's pretty complex when it comes to cars because a lot of the goods that go into making a car, a lot of the parts are also manufactured overseas. So those things that are manufactured overseas then shipped into the United States to be assembled in cars here, they're going to get taxed, they're going to get tariffed, and so the price of cars might go up anyway. It's really complicated. Trump also said that these are reciprocal tariffs, meaning if a country tariffs us, we're going to tariff them in return. That's not quite true. So you have countries that have almost no tariffs on U.S. goods. For example, a country that had almost no tariffs, and then when this was announced, said no tariffs on U.S. goods is Israel. Zero, literally tariffs on U.S. goods. But a reciprocal tariff was imposed on Israel anyway. And this was based on some formula that I actually don't really understand, which was Trump said and his economic advisors, if you have a trade deficit with the U.S., meaning if you sell us more than we buy from you, then we're going to punish you through these reciprocal tariffs. It's kind of confusing. You have countries who have very little or no trade deficit with the United States who are imposing big tariffs on. To me, when I looked at the chart and I tried to understand and go through it, it didn't actually make sense to me. Now, all that being said, I want to give you just kind of my general opinion. Generally, not a fan of tariffs. Now, other countries impose tariffs on us, and if all we do is impose truly reciprocal tariffs, I'm fine with that. Like, I think that's fair. You have 5% tariffs on us, we put 5% tariffs on you. It's a little more or a lot more complicated than that, because it's not like we sell them rice and they sell us rice and we have equal tariffs on those. How do you match goods for goods? How do you determine volumes? All that stuff. It's difficult, but I am a fan of reciprocal tariffs. I'm also a fan of using tariffs to get certain policies out of certain foreign countries, right? So I'm a fan of actually imposing economic penalties and economic pain on China as an adversary. Canada, not really an adversary. So I don't understand, what are we trying to get out of Canada exactly? And you got to go through country by country and look at that. And from my perspective in that way, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm a little bit confused, or a lot confused by that. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm telling you what I think of tariffs generally, what I think of how it works with particular countries and particular goods and all that stuff. So then the question becomes, and I posted this on X, well, am I opposed to what Trump is doing? And my answer to that is yes, sort of, but only in this regard. I want the American economy to thrive. I want it to thrive because I'm an American. I'm a MAGA person. I'm America first, all of that stuff. I want it personally because I want goods and services to be cheaper and more readily available here in the United States. I want average people in the United States to be able to afford a better and better lifestyle here in the United States. I'm for all of that stuff. We have to have a healthy economy to do that. So the question is, what does this actually do to the economy? And I think we're going to have to wait and see. The economy is going to react to this stuff and adjust to this. I don't really know. And in the end, what I would say my conclusion is, I have a lot of faith in President Trump. I think he's more sophisticated than I am in regard to all this kind of stuff. I think basic economics argues against tariffs, but I think Trump has a bigger vision for what the world is and what the world needs to be, and that we've got to figure out how to pay down our debt and all of that stuff. And so I'm going to lean in and give Trump room here. And I'm not going to go after him and attack him like so many people are doing. Now, I don't blame them for doing it. Everybody's free to express their opinion. Just my approach is, I don't necessarily agree with this, but Trump's sure proven to be right on an awful lot of things. And so I'm going to sit back and I'm going to withhold judgment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch how the economy reacts, and not just reacts in the day or in the couple of weeks, but in a little bit longer term. Really important that the economy doesn't tank, because then I worry what happens to us in 2026. I think Republicans would get blown out if the economy is bad. 2028, we could lose the presidency in both houses again, and that's catastrophic. So that's kind of my overall view on tariffs. And one thing I want you to notice in what I'm saying is there's nuance. It really drives me crazy. Everybody tries to do the black and white. You hate it or you're for it. You hate it or you love it. You're against it or you're ecstatic about it. And I don't always look at things that way. I think a lot of politics is very nuanced, and we ought to be sophisticated enough, as especially as conservatives, to look at the issues, do a real analysis for ourselves. Don't just believe what the talking heads tell you or what Wall Street tells you, or whether it's Fox News or MSNBC. Do your own critical analysis. And my critical analysis tells me I don't generally like tariffs, but I'm willing to give President Trump some room here and see what happens. So what's going on in the economy with this stuff? Well, and this isn't related to tariffs, but the first thing is you got to know we released a job report this week, 228,000 new jobs. And that's a lot of jobs. And here's what's extraordinary. What was predicted? 130,000 new jobs. So almost double, about 3/4, 80% more than they expected. That's an incredible jobs report. Now you'll see people wanting to attack this jobs report saying that, yeah, but unemployment ticked up from 4.1 to 4.2%. That is true. But the reason that unemployment ticked up is because there were more people entering the job market, more people who were chronically or permanently unemployed, who had taken themselves out of the job market, who are stepping into the job market, presumably because the job market's good and they see things as hopeful. So I think that's a really good thing that markets, the job market is reacting favorably to Trump's economic policies. We'll see what happens after the tariffs. That's really results pre-tariff. The markets themselves are markedly down based on the tariff news. So they're looking at the jobs report and they're looking at the tariffs and they're saying, we're really nervous. One of the things that consistently drives markets down is uncertainty. And this is nothing if not uncertain, right? We don't know what's going to happen. So the markets are down. That's a problem. It means your 401k, my 401k, whatever, anybody's investments, they're all down and they're down significantly. Now, is that short term? Is that a short term bump? Is this a buying opportunity for people? Maybe. I think time will tell whether, I'm not a trader. I'm a long term investor. I just put my money in and let it grow over time. So we'll see what happens if the markets bounce back. That'll be a different thing. We'll have to see what other countries do as far as tariffs. Right now, things pretty unsettled. All right, let's move from domestic news to international news. There's a lot of international news this weekend. I'm going to start with Israel. What we see Israel doing is what I thought they would do once Trump was in power. I think he held them back for a little bit. They are full on going into Gaza and they are cleaning out Gaza. And this is something, in my opinion, they should have been able to do long ago. They are picking off the terrorists one by one. They are clearing territory. And uniquely now, they are holding that territory. And I think they're going to hold that territory for the long term. They cannot afford to have a terrorist state on their borders. I don't know if you've been watching. There are actually Palestinian citizens protesting in the streets against Hamas. Now, I don't know if this is a setup by Hamas to try to keep Israel out or if it's real. Either way, it signifies a shift in the war in Gaza. And that's pretty impressive. Also, Israel has been actively conducting bombing sorties with drones, with fighter jets against targets in Syria. If you're not paying attention to Syria, Syria's been taken over by radical Islamists. I know a bunch of people on the left cheered because Bashar al-Assad was deposed and unceremoniously left the country. I think he's in exile in Russia now. But the worst of the worst took over, and they are funded and fomented by Turkey, which is a radical Islamic state, which, as an aside, should not be part of NATO. It is part of NATO. It shouldn't be. But they're there, and they're fomenting this. And the Israelis are going in, and what they're doing is they're bombing military targets. They're trying to deprive these radical Islamists of fighter jets, other kinds of aircraft, weaponry, anything, chemical weapons. They've been doing this for weeks now, but they really ramped it up this week. And so I think what you're seeing is you're seeing Syria get neutered, the Islamists there get neutered, and there's a very clear message being sent to Turkey, which is don't mess around on our borders. And Turkey has said, hey, we don't want a direct confrontation with Israel, so which is pretty smart of them, actually, in a geopolitical sense. They couldn't win that confrontation. and they're seeing what's happening to everybody who stands against Israel right now. So right now it looks like Israel is going to essentially bomb all the military targets into submission so that they don't have problems with another Islamist state on their border. So very interesting developments in the Middle East right now. I don't see any kind of actual peace talks taking place. I think the Israelis are going to finish what they came to do in Gaza. And that leads us finally to the fomenter of all this terror, and that is Iran. And Iran is behind all of this stuff. They've been behind the Hamas in Gaza, which is just simply a Nazi movement. They've been behind Hezbollah. They've lost both of those proxy armies. I mean, literally billions of dollars poured into arming those armies. They've basically been wiped out. I mean, there'll be trouble spots for Israel from here on out, but it's nothing like the existential threat that they once faced on their northern border with Hezbollah and in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. The Israelis are going to clean all that stuff out, and that pushes Iran back. And Iran also has another proxy in the Houthis in Yemen, and Iran has now abandoned them. They've come out. They're officially pulling all their forces out of Yemen as the Houthis are bombed into submission by the United States, and they're wiping out all their weapons. Now, there's some rumor that the Houthis are hiding in bunkers somewhere. I'm sure eventually the U.S. is going to do away with those. And what the goal is not just to bomb Yemen. We probably don't have any strategic interest in Yemen proper, but we do have a strategic interest in making sure that the Red Sea shipping lanes stay open. And one of the things that I think is so amazing about the Houthis, who are like 16th century nomads with modern weaponry provided by Iran, one of the things that's so interesting about them, and they're shutting down the Red Sea, is much more of the shipping going through the Red Sea goes to Europe. And Europe has done nothing about this. They allow their ships to be attacked, as we did under Joe Biden, and those attacks continue, and the Red Sea is essentially shut down to shipping. And all of the countries of Europe together, you could add in Canada and countries here and there, Australia, could do nothing to stop the Houthis. They literally have no navy, even collectively, that could do anything about this. There's only one country on earth that could do anything about this, and that's the United States. And the United States, under President Trump's leadership, has now stepped up to do something about it. And I think personally that that's a good thing. No American lives being put at risk. These fighter pilots are well out of the range of anything that, and these bomber pilots and the drones, of anything that the Houthis could throw at them. And so they're basically just picking the targets and nailing the targets. I think it's a really good thing, and I think it shows leadership. And the Iranians have said they're pulling out because they don't want a direct confrontation with the U.S. And the U.S. has demanded that the Iranians come to the negotiating table to dismantle their nuclear program, or President Trump has plainly said it will bomb it into oblivion. And frankly, it'll probably be the Israelis. They have all the targeting information. They will likely do the brunt of the work, but they will use bunker busters. There are 30,000-pound bombs that can actually reach the underground Iranian sites. These are very specialized munitions. There are not a lot of them in the world. They're made in the United States. They'll likely use those to target these underground bunkers and take out the Iranian nuclear program. If the Iranians don't come to the table and have absolute proof that they're dismantling their nuclear program, which would require on-the-ground verification at all sites, then I think Trump's going to follow through and he's going to end the Iranian nuclear program. One of the things I really admire about Trump is he's not messing around. He's not going to have a second term. He knows he's not going to get another shot at this. He knows that there are important things that need to be done, and he's going to finish those things. So I think this is really important. I think the Houthis essentially as a fighting force are going to cease to exist. I like to call them the Houthis, like who are they? Because they're going to be gone. And without Iranian support, they've got nothing. So the Houthis are going to be gone. I think Gaza is going to be secured. I think Syria is going to be neutered. I think Hezbollah and Lebanon has been neutered. What this all means is that after a relatively short time of very intensive activity, we're going to go back to a period of relative peace. Now, Ukraine is a whole other thing. President Trump is engaged with Putin and in Ukraine. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Ukrainians have agreed to a ceasefire. Putin has not agreed to the ceasefire. That really angered President Trump. I mean, he specifically said, forgive my language, I'm pissed off about this. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he can get them to a ceasefire. It's something that he promised early on, even when he was running and early on in his presidency. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know if he can pressure Putin there. Putin clearly has the military advantage. Trump wants that to end. That's a place I don't see a lot of progress right now. So we'll see what happens on that. On another thing on the international stage that I think is not as important as people made it out to be in one way, which is Signalgate, right? The fact that SecDef, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and others, Marco Rubio, were on a text thread on a secure messaging app called Signal. People are trying to make that into some kind of horrible thing, but nothing was revealed that stopped us from decimating the Houthis. No harm, no foul. I think it was bad. I don't think that should have been exposed. I don't think there should have been a journalist on that thread. We should figure out how that happened. We should make sure it can never happen again. But I think there's a tell that comes out of all of this, which is even more important, which is, why are they using Signal? You know, they have secure messaging platforms within the United States government behind what they call the high walls, right? And you might have heard the conversation about high wall in the high wall system. Well, I have a theory about that. Look, if you're fighting the deep state, and by the deep state, I specifically mean the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, do you think they're inside the high wall? Of course they are. Do you think they're leaking stuff that they find inside high wall communications? Well, we know those leaks have been happening. And we know they happened during Trump's first administration, and we've seen some of them happen in the second administration. We know that there are what I would call disloyal people inside the administration still that were in the Biden administration that are deep staters. And so I think that Hegseth and others were using Signal because it's outside the high walls. And people can't generally watch what they're doing unless somebody makes a mistake. I personally think, and this is kind of a out there theory, so forgive me, I don't have proof of this. I think somebody inside that group leaked this to Jeffrey Goldberg. They wanted this leaked, so they put him on that thread. I think we're going to find that out, who did it and whether it was just a mistake. If it's a mistake, I think that person deserves to be probably terminated, whoever it was, for that mistake. If it's not a mistake and it was intentional, obviously they deserve to be terminated and potentially prosecuted for that. So I don't think Signalgate was a scandal in the sense that people make it out to be. I think it is a scandal in the sense that it shows our secure systems are not secure from the enemy's inside. And now on to other technological things. I want to talk a little bit about Meta. Meta, which was Facebook and Instagram, et cetera, announced this week that there will be no more fact checking. That's really interesting. Remember, these are the ones that fact check COVID, fact check the Hunter Biden laptop, censored people, wouldn't let people post. Mark Zuckerberg did a mea culpa a couple of months ago and said it was wrong, it was bad. We're going to get rid of fact checking. We're going to go to community notes. So this week they launched X-style community notes, which I think is pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see how that works. If you're not familiar with X, and the way that works is there's no censorship, there's no fact checking, but citizens who are verified, like I'm one of the people who can do this, that we can fact check, or we can put a citizen note on something and say, this is untrue. Here's why, here's the context for why it's untrue, provide articles, links, etc. And the system seems to work really well. I'm very impressed by the self-policing that goes on X as opposed to Facebook or Instagram. So Zuck is going to impose that on Facebook and Instagram. He said he's laying off all the fact checkers. There will be no more fact checking. Now, I'm still skeptical. And the reason I'm still skeptical is because it still says in Meta's terms and conditions that you can't engage in hate speech and you can't engage in disinformation and stuff like that. Typical woke language. So what does that mean? We'll see what that means, and we'll see how that plays out as they roll out these citizen notes, community notes on Facebook and on Instagram and Threads, which is a platform nobody's ever heard of, which was their attempt to go after X and didn't really succeed. So that's happening. Just keep your eyes on it, right? Don't listen to the noise, wear the hearing protectors, but keep your eyes on it. All right, this week in COS, we had a busy week. We had a hearing in the Texas House Committee last week, and then this week we had the vote, and the vote was an excellent result. It was 8-5 in favor of passage out of the committee. It would have been 9-5. One Republican, Representative Smithy, was out of committee. He would have voted for us, but he didn't end up voting for us because he wasn't there. So we got 8-5. We didn't get any of the Democrats, but a fantastic result. I'm super excited about that. We had another floor. We had a floor vote in Montana. We passed the Senate committee, the House committee, went to the House floor, and unfortunately, we lost on the House floor. That's frustrating. Still incremental progress. I'm happy to have that vote. We know who our targets are. We know who we have to go after. And trust me, we're going to go after them hard. And if you listen to any of these debates, what you hear is stupidity, insanity, dishonesty from our opponents. It's literally just those three things: stupidity, dishonesty, and insanity. We've answered all of the arguments that they propose hundreds of times. I have personally, many others have. Rick Santorum, Mike Ferris, Rob Nadelson, many other scholars. They just won't listen. So that's what's going on in Montana. I was unhappy about that, but we'll be back. Super proud of the teams both in Texas and Montana. Really great folks doing really great work. I love them dearly. All right. Don't forget, by the way, before we leave today, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell to beat the algorithm, right? You want BattleCry to be seen by more people. We need your help. Send it around to your friends. Also, don't forget to go to shopconventionofstates.com. Look at all the new swag there, all the new gear. In fact, I'm wearing one. Look at this one. It's called the Income Robbery Service, the IRS Income Robbery Service. I love this t-shirt. It's super soft, really nice. Somebody said something like the t-shirts are printed on material softer than the parchment upon which the Constitution was written. Yeah, that's true. Way softer. Not just as soft, but way softer. They're really nice. I love them. I love the fit. I love the shirts. Okay, I'll stand up one more time and show it to you. The Income Robbery Service, the IRS. I think that's a better name for the IRS, don't you? So go get your new tees, shopconventionofstates.com. Wear the gear, engage in the conversation. Don't forget to sign our open letter to President Trump. We're making progress there. Go to conventionofstates.com/Trump, conventionofstates.com/Trump. Sign the petition asking President Trump to weigh in favor of Convention of States. All right, now my favorite part, which is where you get to ask me questions. Let's see if we get some really good questions this week. Producer G a couple of weeks ago asked me the best questions I'd ever had anytime in any public forum. So let's see if people were inspired by that. Mark White asked, why is the sovereignty of the states no longer seen as essential or even meaningful in defending individual liberty and freedoms? When did this change occur in America? You know, Mark, I think what happened is that we got fat and happy as a nation. It was pretty easy on us, and we weren't really experiencing tyranny or too much overreach by the federal government. So when you're not experiencing it, it's easy to say it doesn't really matter, right? And so I think that's happened over the last 100 or 115 years. It's like the frog in the pot of boiling water, the proverbial frog, right? It doesn't feel it until it's too late. I think a lot of that's happened in America. I don't think it's too late. I think a bunch of us are jumping out of that pot of water, but it's taken 115 years or so to get to this point. All right, Matt Colossian, yeah, says, has anyone considered the following result from having a successful CS whereby all members of Congress have term limits? Each political party will take over the power of putting forth congressional candidates. Any person wanting to be elected to Congress will have to bow down to each party's views. Thoughts? You know, Mark, Matt, that's super interesting. That's how the parties used to work. In other words, people didn't just run for office on their own. They didn't just decide. The parties put up a slate of candidates. In fact, that's why Republicans are red and Democrats are blue. And you used to just vote on a slate, the blue slate for Democrats, the red slate for Republicans, and the parties actually controlled. And so the parties were much more of a block, generally speaking, than they are today. That changed starting in the 1900s. I believe Wisconsin was the first state to have party primaries. So look, if you're asking me, would we empower the parties through a convention of states and do it that way? I doubt that, but I do think we could impose term limits. I do think that will give the parties more power. Gary Wagner says, can we include an amendment that states any laws passed must apply to Congress as well as the people? Yes, yes, and heck yes. Not only can we should. I think that would be immensely popular. Congress carves itself out from legal liability under the laws, legal applicability of the laws all the time. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. And most Americans, I think all Americans are outraged by that, except for maybe congressmen. That's probably a 99 and 9/10% issue. So yeah, I think we could pass that out of an amendments convention, and I think that could be easily ratified. I want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching the BattleCry. Thank you, as always, for your support. Please go to conventionofstates.com, click on that donate button, $1, $5, $10, become a monthly donor. That's how we keep doing what we're doing. We can't get it done without your help. Again, don't forget to go to conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, click on the Take Action tab, and then get your gear. Go to shopconventionofstates.com, grab your IRS t-shirt, which is your income robbery t-shirt. Wear it around. Tell me kind of what you get looks. Do people say anything to you? What happens when you wear it? And until next week on the BattleCry, God bless you guys. I'll see you later.